The anniversary fell on a Sunday. The kind of day that pretends to forgive you just because it's quiet. We hadn't spoken in a year, but silence is never empty, it just grows its own weather. The sky over Portland was the color of a wound beginning to close. I drove to the lake where he'd first told me about her, pretending it was a place, not a memory. The air smelled of iron and wet wood. I wasn't going there to forgive him. I was going to remind the world he'd been loved. The plan had been simple, ritualistic, maybe romantic in the cruel way grief can be. I'd built a small raft out of driftwood and old sketches from our apartment. The kind of drawings he used to praise before he started calling them childish. On it, I placed 3 things: the photograph of us in New Orleans, his silver lighter, and the envelope he never opened. Inside was a letter I'd written on the night I found out. I'd rewritten it 14 times since, each draft shorter, colder, more precise. Words lose weight when you polish them too long. They start to sound like geometry. By dusk, the lake was still. The raft drifted out easily, carrying its evidence. The water reflected the sky too perfectly, it made me nauseous. I lit the lighter, watched the flame stutter, then caught the corner of the photograph. Fire moved across our faces faster than I expected. For a moment, the reflection looked like a sunrise instead of a funeral. Then the raft sank. That should have been the end. Ritual complete, symmetry restored. But as the last spark disappeared, the lake rippled once, twice, then stilled again. Something small floated back toward me. The envelope, untouched, dry. I didn't move. I didn't have to. The water carried it straight to my feet. When I opened it, the handwriting wasn't mine. It was his. A single line: "You shouldn't have buried me where we met." I laughed at first, sharp, nervous. He was buried in the city cemetery, not here. But the laughter didn't last. I could feel something behind me, not movement exactly, but pressure. The air thickened, heavy enough to bend sound. The surface of the lake shimmered, showing a reflection that wasn't mine. His face, clear, calm, almost tender. He mouthed a word I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. I'd known that expression before, every time I lied and he pretended to believe me. I drove home with the windows down, as if air could wash off memory. But the smell of smoke followed me. In the rearview mirror, my eyes looked darker than they should have. At the apartment, the lights flickered twice before steadying. The photograph from New Orleans was back on my desk, unburned. The corner of the paper was warm. I told myself sleep would fix it. That guilt sounds like a haunting if you give it the right acoustics. But around midnight, the phone rang once and stopped. I didn't answer. I knew it would be him, or something shaped like him, asking how I'd spend the next anniversary. The next morning smelled of rain and old paper. The kind of morning that belongs to people who have already done something they can't undo. I found the photograph still lying on my desk, but the faces were wrong. He wasn't looking at me anymore, he was looking past me. Eyes fixed on something outside the frame. I turned it over. The back was damp, as if it had been underwater, though the room was bone dry. My handwriting, the one from the letter, was there again, but blurred into something I couldn't read. Only one word stood clear: wait. I left the apartment. The street felt too empty, too curated. Even the cars seemed parked in deliberate symmetry. I walked without direction, following the reflection of streetlights on puddles like breadcrumbs. They led me to a cafe we used to visit. The one with the cracked red booth near the back. I hadn't been there since before the betrayal, before I learned what he'd done. The same barista was behind the counter, but when I ordered, she didn't look up. I thought you two moved away, she said softly, as if still talking to him. He's gone, I answered. She shook her head once, eyes still on the counter. He was here yesterday. Said he'd see you today. The coffee was already waiting at our old table when I sat down, 2 cups both steaming. The chair across from me pulled back slightly, not by a person. Just gravity pretending to be one. The air smelled like his cologne, cedar and smoke. I stared into the cup. My reflection looked back, but its mouth moved a fraction too late. You shouldn't have burned it, it said. You shouldn't have buried what wasn't dead. The cafe fell silent. The hum of the fridge in the corner stopped. The lights dimmed. I blinked, and the chair opposite me wasn't empty anymore. He sat there, dressed exactly as he had the night I confronted him, the gray shirt. The open collar, the small burn mark on his wrist where the lighter had sparked. His face was calm, expression patient, almost gentle. You came back, I said. You never left, he answered. His voice sounded like memory, low and distant. Too familiar to question. I wanted to reach across the table to prove he was air. But my hand trembled before it moved. He smiled faintly. You think revenge ends when someone stops breathing? You think love does? I shot back. The cup between us rattled once. The sound was small, fragile. You brought me back, he said. You wrote it into the water. I didn't understand. But the words made something inside me ache. He leaned closer. Every year you'll come here. You'll light something, drown something, pretend it's closure. That's how I live now. I wanted to look away, but his eyes wouldn't let me. The cafe lights flickered again. And suddenly he wasn't sitting across from me, he was reflected in every surface. 1,000 versions watching quietly. Stop, I whispered, but the reflections didn't. They kept multiplying until they blurred into a single red shape pulsing against the window. Then, just as suddenly, the hum of the fridge returned, and the air smelled like coffee again. The second cup was gone. The barista looked over, puzzled. You're pale, she said. You all right? I nodded, but when I stood to leave, the photo slid from my pocket, landing face up on the floor. In it, we were both sitting at the cafe table. 2 steaming cups between us, the same booth, the same moment. Only one difference, he was smiling. I wasn't. That night I dreamed the lake had drained itself, leaving only the shape of its absence. The mud gleamed under a light that wasn't the moon. And in the center stood the raft I had burned, intact again, the photograph dry. The lighter still shining. Something inside the waterless air whispered, you did this. When I woke, the sound didn't stop. It was coming from the walls, the low pulse of pipes or blood or memory. I pressed my ear against the plaster and heard breathing on the other side. It matched mine. The mirror in the hallway fogged itself even though the air was cold. I wiped it with my sleeve and found words traced there, faint as fingerprints, anniversary too. I didn't remember writing them, but they were in my handwriting. I should have run. Instead, I dressed, put on his jacket, the one I'd kept out of spite. The one that still smelled like him after a year, and walked out into the rain. The street was empty except for puddles reflecting lights that blinked out when I stepped past. The cafe sign was off, but the door was open. The same table waited. 2 cups. Steam. I didn't sit down. I said his name, softly at first, then louder. The hum in the walls answered. It rose and fell like a breath held too long. Then he spoke, though there was no one there. You said it was revenge, the voice murmured from everywhere. But it was resurrection. The words came from behind me, but when I turned, The window showed only my reflection, wet hair, pale skin. His jacket hanging wrong on my shoulders. You brought me back every time you remembered, the reflection said. Mouth moving just ahead of mine. You keep digging. The reflection lifted its hand, and a drop of water slid from its fingertips down the glass. Only then did I feel it on my own skin. The drop was warm. I took a step back, but the window fogged again, forming shapes that pulsed like a heartbeat. You wrote me in ink that bleeds. I whispered, what do you want? And the reflection smiled. Company. The lights in the cafe went out. The smell of cedar filled the air, thick and wet, wrapping around me like breath. I heard the scrape of a chair and the sound of a lighter flicking once, twice before catching. When the flame appeared, it wasn't on the table, it was inside the mirror, burning backward. For a second I saw us both reflected there, the night we met, his hand on mine. The same lighter between us. I remembered the promise we made, to never let the truth ruin a good story. The flame dimmed. The reflection leaned close, whispering, you kept your part. I stumbled out into the street. The rain had stopped. But the pavement glowed red where my footprints should have been. The lake was miles away, but I could smell it, iron and smoke. As if the world was folding in on itself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message. No number. Just a date, next year. I tried to move away that year. Packed the boxes, changed the number. Bought a cheap apartment near the coast where the ocean kept erasing itself every few seconds. Pretending to be new. But memory doesn't need walls, it builds its own. I stopped telling people my last name, stopped answering the door. Still, on the anniversary week, the air thickened. It began with sound, the kettle whispering before boiling, the fridge breathing too loud. The same low hum I'd heard in the cafe. I told myself it was electricity, but deep down I recognized the rhythm. His. I found the photograph again, tucked inside a book I hadn't opened. The image had changed, it was only me now, sitting alone in the booth. The empty cup steaming across from me. A small shape of light hovered over it, faint, flame-like. When I touched the corner, the paper was warm. I walked to the beach at dusk, carrying the lighter. I told myself I'd throw it into the tide, let the salt eat it. But the water was too still, unnaturally still, as if waiting. A thin fog rolled in, slow and deliberate. Swallowing the horizon until it felt like I was the only living thing left. Then I saw him. Not his body, his outline, the shimmer of heat where there shouldn't be any. The same shape I'd seen the night I burned the raft, the one the lake had returned. He stood just past the tide line, looking at me with eyes that weren't eyes at all. Just the reflection of fire. You're early, he said, voice flat, unanchored. It isn't today. It's every day, I said. You made it that way. He laughed softly, a sound that didn't bend the air. You still think you're the one who did this? He took a step forward, the sand didn't shift beneath him. You brought me back because you needed someone to hold the blame. I stayed because you needed me to stay. I wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong, but guilt has no language, only repetition. You're dead, I said. You're what's left. Then what does that make you? The lighter in my hand sparked by itself, a tiny flash of orange trembling in the wind. His shape flickered with it, as if both were burning on the same wick. Stop coming back, I said. Stop calling. You called first. The fog thickened until it pressed against my skin. The hum returned, not from the sea this time but from inside my chest. It grew louder until I could feel it in my teeth. He stepped closer, and the air around him folded inward, the beach tilting. the ocean curving toward us like a held breath. Say it, he whispered. Say what you buried. The flame wavered. I wanted to tell him it was revenge, not love, that I'd done it to hurt him, that I'd meant every cut of the raft's wood. But the words that came out weren't mine. I miss you, I said. His shape steadied, and for the first time, I saw his face clearly, not the man I'd known, but something quieter, sadder, empty of cruelty. He smiled, faint and tired. Now we're even. The lighter went out. The wind stopped. The fog receded, taking him with it. When I looked down, my footprints had vanished. Only the sand where I stood glowed faintly, the color of cooling ash. That night, back in the apartment, I heard waves against the windows though the sea was miles away. On the mirror, condensation spelled the same single word as before: wait. I didn't plan to return for the 5th anniversary. But the calendar doesn't care what you promise yourself. I woke that morning with the taste of smoke in my mouth and sand beneath my nails. The apartment felt smaller, walls bowed inward like lungs that had forgotten how to exhale. Every object carried a pulse. The lamp flickered to a steady rhythm, the pipes throbbed softly. The mirror on the bathroom door breathed fog even before I turned on the shower. I wiped it with my hand. The reflection stared back, half a second late, smiling in a way I hadn't in years. Behind me, another figure flickered, his shape faint and patient. It's time, he said, voice low, metallic, like a recording played underwater. I didn't turn around. You said we were even. Even isn't the same as done, he answered. You still remember me. I stepped outside, leaving the door unlocked. The sky had that washed-out blue that looks like film about to burn. I drove toward the lake, though I never made the choice to do it. The road seemed to decide for me, folding itself into the route I'd taken every year before. The trees along the way leaned toward the car as I passed, branches brushing the windows like fingers. When I reached the shore, the water was too calm, its surface smooth as polished stone. The reflection of the sky was wrong, it shimmered red, like light seen through eyelids. I walked to the edge and saw him standing where the raft had once burned. No shadow beneath his feet, the air around him rippling. I've been patient, he said. You keep bringing me back. You keep staying. You don't know what you've made. I watched the water shift around his shape. A circle spreading wider and wider but never breaking. What did I make? I asked. A story, he said. And stories need endings. The circle widened again, and I realized the water wasn't water, it was glass. Beneath the surface, thousands of small faces looked up, mine and his and ours. Frozen mid-sentence. They blinked, almost in unison. You've been writing me, he said. Every time you tell it, every time you remember, I wake up again. Then I'll stop, I said. You can't. You're part of it now. He lifted his hand and the surface cracked in a perfect ring around my feet. The air filled with the same low hum I'd been hearing for years, louder now, vast, endless. The reflection of the sky shattered, but the world didn't fall, only folded inward. Lake becoming ceiling, air turning liquid. For a moment we were both suspended there, breathing inside the same pulse. It's your turn, he said. Then the hum stopped. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on the other side of the lake, dry, unharmed. The lighter cold in my hand. The water was empty. No reflection, no ripple. The surface was flat as a mirror waiting to be filled. I dropped the lighter in and watched it sink without sound. As it disappeared, the water rippled once, showing his face for the last time, and beneath it, my own, calm, expressionless, the same. That night, back at the apartment, I wrote down what happened because I was afraid to forget. And when I finished, the pen wouldn't stop moving. The letters kept writing themselves, the page filling with words I didn't choose. At the bottom, beneath my signature, one final line appeared in unfamiliar handwriting. Next year, you'll tell it again.